Hi everyone. Today we're taking a look at the RBH MC-4C speaker. It's a high quality compact speaker. It retails for $529 per pair. Doing a little tour of the speaker to start with, we have a 4-inch aluminum woofer. We also have a 1-inch aluminum dome tweeter with a little wire guard and waveguide. Now these are set in what is called a resonance damping alloy baffle, or RDAB. It's a cosmetic baffle, but it also has a function. It's designed to really limit as much of the vibration on the front panel as possible, keeping the sound nice and clean. Now we do have a post-mounted grill that goes with this. And as you can see, and we'll get a close-up shot of this, these are sturdy metal posts. So you're not going to have to worry about flimsy binding posts, or excuse me, flimsy mounting posts popping off on this speaker. And then that grill mounts on there nice and flush all the way around. Also of note as we go around the speaker, this is a real wood veneer. It's a black oak. And what I found unique about this that I didn't see in a lot of other black oak finished products that I've seen is that there's an actual texture to it. This grain has an actual texture. And at first I almost didn't think it was real wood. There's just something a little artificial looking about it, but just because I've never seen that level of texture in these. Now, from a distance, what's really nice is that it catches the light and gives it a lot of interest. It kind of stands out in maybe a little more organic way from a distance than it does up close, but something pretty unique to the finish. Around the back of the speaker, you'll notice there's no port on the front, no port on the back. This is a sealed speaker design. We do have 2 threaded mounting posts, and these speakers are 7.5 pounds each. These are very solid speakers. And so with these mounting posts, you're guaranteed to get a good connection between this speaker and the wall if you choose to put it there, or you could even use it to secure it to some stands with some backs. All right, so I mentioned the 7.5 pound weight of the speakers. Certainly high quality drivers go into that, but there's also a 3/4 inch MDF construction. So this is a high quality enclosure. There is no bracing on the enclosure that I could see, but in a speaker this size, you really don't need to worry about enclosure flex too much. Now, trying to sneak a peek at the innards of this speaker was a bit tricky because, as you'll notice, there's no mounting hardware on the front. I mean, this thing is inset. You're not getting in from the front. And around the back, and I should mention, very nice heavy metal speaker binding post here, is the cup, the speaker terminal cup. That's the only way to peel that off and get a look at the back. And I was able to peel that off and couldn't see too much on the inside, but we got a nice look at the crossover, which is minimal components, and they're all high quality components. So not a lot of complexity in the crossover, but high quality components. So you're pretty much guaranteed that you're going to get good response out of the quality drivers and quality components of this. Now, one thing to keep in mind whenever you're working with a small sealed speaker, and that's that you're going to need to mate these with a subwoofer for full range sound. And it's going to need to be a subwoofer with a fairly high frequency response, something in the mid 100 hertz. The Yamaha receiver that I connected these up with, the RX-A2040, only had 3 crossover frequencies available to me around that 100 hertz range, and that was 120 hertz, 160 hertz, and 200 hertz. I found the 160 hertz setting worked the best when using these speakers with the SVS PB12 NSD subwoofer that I have. Moving on to listening for these speakers, I started with Ani DeFranco's Red Letter Year, and I got that in an HD format downloaded from hdtracks.com. On the track Present Infant, there's a good variety of percussion, including tambourines and shakers, which let the MC-4C show off a nice high-end detail, and all the instruments stayed distinct in the mix. Even in my relatively large space, I found that the RBH speakers were clean and clear throughout the vocal range. I was looking for a good mid and low frequency test as well, so I moved on to the track Way Tight, which features this nice interplay between a guitar and a bass. The MC-4Cs captured all the finger picking and the nice woody body to the guitar. Looking for something a little bigger and more dynamic, I moved on to one of my favorite albums of last year, and that's This Is My Hand by My Brightest Diamond. What's great about this album is that it has a huge orchestral feel to it, and the opening track Pressure really shows that off well. It starts off with this rat-a-tat-tat marching band style snare work, which really allowed the RBHs to image very well, to really have a nice centered image. I will say the speakers did sound a little bit small compared to my standard much larger speakers. In looking at the measurements for these speakers, once you get about 30 degrees off center, you see a little bit of a high frequency dip. And I think that combined with the limited bass response made them a little more localizable in stereo listening if you aren't seated exactly center. I found that compared to my larger speakers, I did prefer to have them a little closer to one another than I typically do. I did have 4 of the RBH speakers on hand, so I set 3 of them up in an identical front soundstage and queued up everybody's audio darling of last year, Gravity. At about 10 minutes into the movie, the primary incident occurs. I'm not going to give you any spoilers. And we're treated to this bounty of dialogue coming from a variety of areas and movement-matched pans where items around the screen are bouncing from speaker to speaker. With all of this going on, I really thought the MC-4Cs integrated well with each other and created very seamless pans, even with critical dialogue. Getting out my trusty SPL meter, I noticed that we were pushing into 97 decibel range on these speakers, and so that really is pretty much the limitation you can expect out of a speaker like this. I will say that they performed very well. They never got out of control, never made any obnoxious noises, never gave me any indication that they were giving up, so to speak, with the material. Just keep in mind that whenever you're working with speakers of this size, especially in a larger room, you're not going to get super movie theater output out of them. There are always going to be compromises, and the laws of physics can only be bent, not broken. For the full suite of measurements, you're going to want to go to audioholics.com and check out the full written review. But the one thing that I absolutely have to note is how accurate these speakers were across the average listening window. Take a look at this graph, and you'll see they're very flat, very accurate when looked at through a 1 meter, 1/12 octave smooth response. All these measurements are taken in room, so do keep in mind that the low frequency, I will call them irregularities that you're seeing, are really a product of room interactions, not the inaccuracy of the speaker. In fact, we can check that just by splicing a near-field woofer measurement with the average response of the speaker itself, which you can see here. Sometimes I think manufacturers will cut back on the quality of components and the engineering that they put into compact speakers, assuming that anybody shopping for small speakers is always on the bargain basement side of the value spectrum. And that's not what we're talking about here. These speakers are really for folks that want high quality sound, but just don't have a whole room that they could dedicate to full large speakers. The RBH MC-4C is really the small speaker for customers who are putting a premium on appearance and don't want to make any sonic compromises. When you combine these with a capable subwoofer, you're going to find out that you have a perfect compact system that looks great and offers as few compromises as possible. I would say that the only downside to these speakers right now is that there's a lot of competition in the marketplace. So SVS just came out with their Prime series. NHT has always made really well-regarded compact speakers. And keeping in mind that $529 is the MSRP, and that doesn't mean that you won't be able to find these less expensive, they are being undercut a little bit by some of the other well-regarded names in the field. Nonetheless, you've got a good-looking speaker, you've got a good sounding speaker, it's compact, so it's going to fit in a variety of locations around your house. This really is a kind of do-it-all utility speaker for folks that don't want to give up the quality of sound when they can't accommodate a huge tower speaker in their room.